The air smelled of smoke and sweat, heavy with the noise of hundreds of alien voices. Torches burned along the walls, their flames flickering against metal cages lined up across the dark hall. Inside the cages were young girls from different alien species, their eyes wide, their wrists tied, their bodies trembling. Some looked broken, some looked angry, but all of them were waiting for the same cruel fate. Tonight was the auction. The crowd cheered and laughed as the announcer shouted prices. A massive creature with 6 arms pulled one girl forward, holding her chin high so buyers could see her face. She tried to fight, but chains dragged her down. The announcer called her a pleasure animal, a term that made the crowd roar with ugly excitement. In one of the cages, near the corner of the hall, sat a girl with silver hair and violet eyes. She looked younger than the rest, her face pale, her hands shaking. She hugged her knees, trying to make herself invisible, but she knew her turn would come. She had been told all week what she was worth, how men would buy her, how she would be used. She wanted to vanish, but there was no escape. The announcer's voice echoed again. "Tonight, gentlemen, we have something rare, something special." He slapped the bars of her cage. The crowd pressed closer, eyes shining with greed. A young specimen, untouched, perfect for pleasure. "Who will start the bidding?" The girl's heart sank. She closed her eyes, waiting for the worst, and then the doors of the hall opened, a hush spread across the crowd. A man walked inside, not like the others, not like the creatures who filled the auction house. He was human, middle-aged. His hair was dark with streaks of gray, his face lined with time but strong, calm, unshaken by the filth around him. His clothes were simple, but he carried himself with the weight of someone who had seen too much of life already. Whispers spread quickly. "A human here? What does he want?" "They never buy from us." The man's boots echoed as he stepped through the hall, his eyes scanning the cages. He did not leer, did not smile with cruelty. His gaze was sharp, heavy, like someone who saw more than just bodies for sale. The girl with violet eyes felt his stare fall on her. For a brief second, she lifted her head. Their eyes met. She froze. His expression was unreadable, but it was not the same hunger the others carried. It was something else, something she could not understand. The announcer rubbed his hands together. A human buyer. A rare guest indeed. Step forward, sir, and see for yourself. This girl is perfect, trained to obey, untouched, a jewel for your collection. The crowd laughed and jeered. Some shouted dirty jokes. Others muttered insults about humans wasting money on such things. But the man ignored them. He walked straight to her cage. The girl shrank back, pressing against the bars. She had seen cruel faces before. She had been told again and again that no one would ever see her as more than an animal. Surely this man was no different. The announcer opened the cage, yanking her forward by the arm. She stumbled, falling to her knees before the human. Her silver hair spilled across the floor. The crowd shouted, eager for the first bid. The announcer grinned. "Shall we start at 10,000 credits? For a prize like this, surely worth more." The man's voice broke the silence. Calm. Low. Firm. "I'll buy her." The crowd erupted with noise. Some laughed, some cursed, some cheered, but none of them missed the tone in his voice. It was not the desperate, greedy cry of a man hungry for pleasure. It was steady, commanding, final. The announcer blinked, surprised. At the asking price?" "Yes," the man said. His eyes never left the girl. The announcer hesitated only a moment, then slammed his hand on the desk. "Sold to the human." The crowd roared. Some clapped mockingly, others sneered. "Poor fool. He'll regret it." Humans are strange creatures. The girl's heart pounded as the chains around her wrists were unlocked. She expected the man to grab her, to drag her the way others always did, but he did not. Instead, he extended his hand, not to pull, not to force, but simply waiting. She stared at his hand, trembling, not understanding. Slowly, with fear and confusion, she reached out. His fingers closed gently around hers. The crowd jeered louder, mocking him for treating her like a person. But the man ignored them. Without a word, he led her out of the auction hall. The torches flickered as the door shut behind them. The noise of the crowd faded into silence. For the first time in years, the girl felt the air of the outside world on her face. She looked at the man, still trying to guess what kind of master he was. But his calm eyes revealed nothing. Only one thought burned inside her. Why had this human bought her? The night air outside the auction hall was cool, almost too quiet after the noise and laughter of the crowd inside. The human Daniel walked steadily, the girl beside him. His hand still held hers, not tight, not rough, just firm enough that she wouldn't fall. The crowd's jeers echoed in her ears, but here, outside, only silence remained. She dared not speak. Her throat felt dry, her heart still pounding. Every step made her more certain this man would reveal his true nature. Sooner or later he would drag her somewhere dark, somewhere hidden, where no one would hear her cries. That was what masters did, but Daniel said nothing. His pace never changed. He didn't glance at her the way the buyers inside had done. He looked forward, as though the filthy auction house behind him had never existed. Finally, they reached a transport pod waiting at the edge of the market square. Its lights hummed faintly in the night. Daniel stopped, opened the door, and motioned for her to step inside. The girl froze. Inside had always meant cages, chains, darkness. She shook her head, stepping back. Daniel didn't move closer. He didn't shout, didn't strike her for disobedience. He only lowered his voice, calm and steady. "You're safe." 2 words, simple, but no master had ever said them. Her legs trembled. Slowly, she climbed into the pod. The seat was soft, clean, unlike the cold metal floors she had known. Daniel entered after her, sitting on the opposite side. He tapped the controls and the pod lifted, gliding away into the night sky. The city lights faded below them, replaced by endless stretches of dark plains and distant stars. The girl stared out, clutching her knees, her eyes darting to him every few seconds. He didn't look back. His gaze stayed fixed on the stars, silent as stone. At last her fear forced a whisper from her lips. Why did you buy me?" Daniel turned his head slowly. His eyes met hers. For a moment she thought he might laugh or say the same words every buyer had said before, that she was his property, that she was his pleasure. But instead, he said something she had never heard. "Because no one else should." Her chest tightened. She didn't understand. Was this some trick? Some cruel game? She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. The pod finally landed in a quiet settlement far from the city. The air smelled cleaner here, the streets empty, lined with simple houses instead of towers of stone and iron. Daniel stepped out first, then held the door for her. She hesitated, but his calm patience somehow forced her legs to move. His home stood at the edge of the settlement. A small place built of stone and metal, lights glowing warmly through the windows. As he opened the door, the scent of cooked food drifted out. Her stomach twisted painfully. She hadn't eaten a full meal in days. He noticed the way she clutched her belly. Without a word, he walked to the kitchen. The girl stayed near the door, unsure if stepping inside would bring punishment. She had learned long ago that taking without permission meant pain, but Daniel returned with a plate of food. He set it on the table, then pulled out a chair. His voice was even. "Sit." She didn't move. "Sit," he repeated, softer this time, not as a command but as an invitation. Her legs shook as she lowered herself into the chair. The plate steamed before her. Bread, roasted meat, vegetables. She reached for it with trembling fingers, waiting for the blow that would surely follow. But none came. She ate. At first carefully, then faster, until tears blurred her eyes. The taste was real, warm, filling. She hadn't realized how empty she had been until now. Daniel sat across from her, eating quietly from his own plate. He didn't stare, didn't laugh at her hunger. He let her eat until she was finished, then collected the plates and washed them. Simple actions, ordinary yet so alien to her world. When the meal was done, he pointed to a door down the hall. "That's your room." She froze again. Rooms had never belonged to her. Rooms were for owners. She shook her head, whispering, "No, not mine." Daniel's gaze softened, but his words remained steady. "It is now." He turned away, leaving her alone with the choice. The girl's chest ached. Everything felt wrong. This house, this food, this strange man who didn't treat her like an animal. She crept to the door, slowly opening it. Inside was a bed. A real bed, soft and covered with blankets. She touched it carefully as though it might vanish. She curled up on top of it, too scared to crawl under the covers. But as her eyes closed, she realized something terrifying. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sleeping in chains, and she didn't know if she could trust that freedom. The morning light filtered through thin curtains, soft and golden. The alien girl opened her eyes slowly, confused by the warmth on her face. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming. She wasn't lying on a cold floor. She wasn't inside a cage and no chains cut into her wrists. Instead, she lay on a bed, the blanket loose over her body. Her first instinct was fear. She sat up quickly, her heart racing, scanning the room. No guards, no locks. Just a small, simple space. A dresser stood against the wall. A window overlooked quiet fields. It was nothing like the rooms of pain she had known. Then came the second thought. Where was he? She listened. The sound of something clattering reached her ears. Metal against metal. Her chest tightened. Was he preparing punishment or worse? She crept to the door and pressed her ear against it. Voices of cruelty didn't echo here. Instead, she heard the low hum of a stove and the faint smell of cooked food. Her stomach twisted with hunger again. Carefully, she pushed the door open. Daniel stood in the kitchen, back turned, cooking. A pan sizzled on the stove. He moved calmly, as if he had done this many mornings before. His shoulders were broad, his movements steady, and there was no trace of the predator she expected. He turned his head when he sensed her presence. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was calm. Hungry? The girl froze. Words caught in her throat. She gave the smallest nod. He motioned to the table. Sit. Slowly, she obeyed, still expecting some hidden trap. Daniel placed a plate in front of her. Eggs, bread, fruit. Nothing poisoned, nothing spoiled. She waited, but he didn't snatch the food away. He only returned to his own chair and began eating. The silence stretched, but it wasn't cruel silence. It was ordinary. She ate carefully, her hands shaking. With every bite, she felt her body loosen, as though it was remembering what safety might feel like. When the meal was done, she whispered, "Why?" Daniel's eyes met hers. He didn't ask her to explain the question. He only said, "Because you deserve more than what they gave you." Her breath caught. She didn't believe him, not yet. She had lived too long in chains to believe kindness could be real, but still the words sat inside her like a small spark of warmth. After breakfast, Daniel stood and gestured toward the door. "Come, you should see." Fearful, she followed him outside. The world beyond his home stretched wide, fields of green under a clear blue sky. A small garden by the door, tools stacked neatly against the wall. It was quiet, far from the noise of the city. The girl turned slowly, her eyes wide. She had never seen freedom without bars. The air smelled fresh. The sky felt too big. It was overwhelming. She clutched her arms tightly, afraid she might float away. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "You can walk here. No one will stop you. No one will take you back." She blinked at him, not understanding. "But I belong to you." His jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm. "You don't belong to anyone." Not anymore, her mind spun. The words made no sense. Every part of her life had been built on the truth that she was property. To hear otherwise felt dangerous, like a lie too sweet to trust. Back inside, Daniel gave her clothes, simple, soft fabric, nothing like the torn rags she had worn before. She touched them carefully, afraid she might ruin them. He didn't force her to change. He only set them on the bed and left the room. The hours passed. She wandered the house, small steps at first, as if testing invisible chains. Every room was open. No locked doors, no hidden cages. She found shelves of books, tools, a desk with papers. Everything told her this was not the home of a cruel master. It was the home of a man who lived simply, quietly. But still, she couldn't relax. That night, fear returned. She sat on the bed, waiting. She knew the moment would come, when he would demand what he had truly bought her for. Every second, her heart pounded harder. When the sound of his footsteps came down the hall, she closed her eyes tightly, preparing for the door to open. But the footsteps didn't stop at her door. Instead, they moved past. A second later, she heard another door open, then close. Silence. She opened her eyes, stunned. He hadn't come for her. He had gone to his own room. Her mind was chaos. This wasn't how the world worked. No man ever waited. No man ever treated her like more than property. She hugged herself, tears sliding down her cheeks. For the first time, she didn't know what tomorrow would bring. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought burned inside her. What kind of man was this human? Night fell over the quiet settlement. The sky outside Daniel's home shimmered with stars, bright and endless. Inside, the girl sat at the edge of her bed, her hands twisting the blanket nervously. Every beat of her heart reminded her of the fear she carried. She had survived cages, whips, and cruel masters, but now she faced something new, something she didn't understand. She waited, listening to the creaks of the house. Her body was tense, ready for the sound of his footsteps. She knew what men did at night. She had been told again and again, sold with that promise. No kindness lasted. No silence was safe. Her breath caught when she finally heard it, the soft sound of his steps in the hallway. She shut her eyes, bracing for the door to open, for the nightmare to return. But the footsteps passed. Her eyes flew open in shock. She listened harder. A door clicked open down the hall, then closed. Silence, her hands trembled. He hadn't come for her. He had walked past, gone to his own room, leaving her untouched. She stayed awake for hours, waiting, certain he would return later. But he never did. The only sounds were the wind outside and the soft hum of the house. When sleep finally took her, it was the deepest rest she had known in years. The next morning, Daniel was already in the kitchen preparing food. The girl approached carefully, watching him from the doorway. He glanced at her once, then back at the pan. "Sleep well?" he asked. The question was simple, ordinary, but it struck her like a blow. No one had ever asked how she slept. She nodded slightly, unsure if speaking was safe. Daniel served her breakfast, setting the plate before her. She waited again, certain there was a trick. But he only sat across from her, eating his own meal. After a long silence, he said, "You're free to leave the room at night. No one will stop you." Her fork froze in midair. The words felt impossible. "Free?" she whispered. "Yes," he said calmly. "Free." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but fear wrapped around her like chains. Still, his eyes were steady, holding no mockery, no hidden cruelty. That afternoon, Daniel went outside to work in the garden. The girl watched from the doorway, unsure if she should follow. He didn't call her, didn't order her. He just worked quietly, planting seeds in the soil. Finally, she stepped outside, barefoot on the grass. The earth was soft beneath her toes, the sun warm on her skin. She had forgotten how the world felt outside of cages. She moved slowly, as though the air itself might punish her. Daniel looked up once, nodded slightly, and returned to his work. No commands, no threats, just quiet acceptance. The girl knelt in the dirt a few feet away. Her hands hovered over the soil, uncertain. She had never been asked to help with something that wasn't cruel labor. After a long moment, she pressed her fingers into the earth, copying his motions. Daniel said nothing, but she saw a faint smile tug at the corner of his lips. That night, fear returned again. As she lay in bed, every creak of the house sent her heart racing. She remembered the garden, the food, the silence of the night before, but doubt whispered that it couldn't last. When the footsteps came down the hall, she gripped the blanket, ready to scream. But again the steps passed her door. Again she heard his own door close. She sat up, trembling, unable to understand. Why didn't he come? Why didn't he claim what he had bought? Her mind spun with questions. Finally she stood. Quietly she pushed open her door and walked down the hall. Her bare feet made no sound on the floor. She stopped outside his room. The door closed tight. For a long moment she stared, her hand hovering over the handle. Part of her wanted to open it, to prove her fears true. If he was pretending, if this was all a cruel trick, she wanted to know now. But her hand fell back to her side. She turned away. When she returned to her bed, tears slid down her cheeks. Not from fear this time, but from confusion. She had been taught her whole life that men were monsters. But this one left her alone. Days passed. Every night became a test. Every morning became a shock. Slowly, the fear inside her began to shift. Not vanish, but soften. She started to believe, just a little, that maybe he was different. One morning, Daniel handed her a small book. "For you," he said. She blinked at it, confused. She opened the cover, her eyes scanning the strange human letters. Her people had been forbidden to read, forbidden to learn. Her hands shook as she touched the pages. Daniel's voice was calm. "I'll teach you if you want." Her throat tightened. She nodded, clutching the book to her chest. It was the first gift she had ever been given. That night, lying in bed, the girl whispered to herself for the first time in years. Not a prayer, not a cry for help, just a thought. Maybe he doesn't want to hurt me. And with that thought, she closed her eyes and slept without fear. The settlement was small, and small places carried big whispers. It didn't take long before people noticed Daniel walking through the streets with the alien girl at his side. At first, she kept her head down, hair falling across her face. She walked with small steps, terrified of eyes on her, but Daniel didn't hide her. He didn't drag her with chains. He simply walked beside her as though she was his equal. His hand sometimes brushed hers, not to control her but to steady her. The neighbors watched in silence. Some muttered to each other as Daniel passed. Others stared with open disgust. Humans had always kept distance from the pleasure markets. They despised them, but they also feared speaking against them. And now here was Daniel bringing home one of the broken girls and treating her like a wife. One old man spat on the ground as they passed. "Shameful," he muttered. "A human with one of them." Another whispered to her friend, "He's lost his mind. You'll see. She'll cut his throat in his sleep." The girl heard every word. Each whisper burned like fire in her chest. She wanted to pull away, to hide, but Daniel's steady pace never changed. He didn't argue with the neighbors, didn't defend himself. He just kept walking, his calm silence louder than their cruelty. In the market square, the tension grew sharper. Traders stopped what they were doing when they saw her. A group of aliens sneered, their voices carrying across the stalls. "Look," one of them laughed. "The human treats her like a mate," another hissed. "He doesn't know what she is. She was trained to obey men. He'll regret his foolish pride." The girl lowered her head, her hands trembling, but Daniel reached for a piece of fruit from a vendor's stall, paid for it, and placed it gently into her hands. "Eat," he said simply. She blinked, startled. Everyone was staring, their eyes sharp as knives, and yet he handed her food as though they were the only two people in the world. Her chest tightened. For the first time, she dared to take a small bite while others watched. The whispers grew louder. Some were disgusted, some were curious, but none could ignore what they had seen, a human treating a pleasure animal like someone worth respect. That evening, when they returned home, the girl finally spoke, her voice trembling. Why do you not hide me?" "They all hate it. They hate me." Daniel looked at her, his expression calm but his voice firm. "I don't care what they hate. You are my wife." Her heart stopped. The word struck her harder than any chain. Wife. No one had ever called her that. She wanted to believe him, but the word felt too heavy, too impossible. She whispered, "But I'm not worthy." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Don't ever say that again." The silence that followed was thick, but inside her something shifted. He wasn't saying these things for show. He meant them. The next day, the reaction grew darker. 3 alien men waited near the edge of the settlement, their eyes cold. When Daniel walked by with the girl, they stepped forward, blocking the path. "She belongs to us," one hissed. "You bought her from the market, but she will never be your equal." "Give her back." The girl froze, her knees shaking. This was it, the moment he would abandon her. She had expected it all along. He would hand her over to save himself. But Daniel didn't step aside. His voice was low and steady. "No, she's not yours anymore." The aliens bared their teeth, anger flashing in their eyes. "Do you dare defy the law of the market? Do you dare shame us in front of others?" Daniel didn't flinch. "Yes," the girl's breath caught. She looked up at him, stunned. He wasn't just protecting her, he was challenging them. Openly in public, the aliens spat threats and stormed away. But the danger in their eyes promised they would return. That night, the girl sat at the table, silent, her hands trembling. "They will kill you," she whispered. "You shouldn't risk yourself for me." Daniel looked at her calmly. "They can try, but I will not give you back." Her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't understand him. She had been sold as nothing more than a body, a tool. Yet here was a man who stood against the world for her. "Why?" she asked again, desperate. "Why me?" For the first time, Daniel's voice softened in a way that shook her. "Because when I looked at you in that cage, I saw someone worth saving." Her chest ached with feelings she didn't know how to name. Gratitude, fear, hope. She pressed her hands against her face, trying to stop the tears. Word spread quickly after that. Some called Daniel a hero. Others called him a fool. But no one could ignore the human who defied the markets, who treated an alien girl like a wife instead of a slave. And deep inside her heart, for the first time, the girl began to wonder. Maybe she could believe him. Maybe she wasn't just property. Maybe she could be more. The days that followed were uneasy. The settlement had grown colder toward Daniel and the girl. Neighbors who once greeted him now looked away. Whispers filled the air wherever they walked. Some spoke with disgust, others with fear, but all agreed on one thing. This human was challenging rules no one dared touch. The girl felt the tension growing heavier. Every glance, every hushed voice reminded her of the market, of the chains she had escaped. She lived each day waiting for the moment it would all be taken away again. And then one evening it happened. The sun was dipping low when shadows moved at the edge of the field. Daniel was tending to the garden when he noticed them, 3 figures approaching, tall and broad. He recognized them at once, the traders from the market. The girl froze on the porch. Her body went cold. Their eyes locked onto her, filled with the greed she knew too well. "Daniel," one of them growled, "you've caused enough shame. Give her back. She belongs to us." Daniel stood, wiping his hands calmly on a cloth. His voice was steady. "No, she belongs to no one." The traders laughed cruelly. "You think you can change the law with your stubborn pride? She was bred for one purpose. You insult every tradition by keeping her here." The girl's heart raced. She clutched the railing, trembling. She whispered, "Please let me go. If you fight them, they'll kill you. I am not worth your life." Daniel turned, his eyes locking on hers. His voice was firm, carrying a weight that silenced even her fear. "You are my wife now. They'll have to kill me to take you." Her breath caught. The words burned into her heart, stronger than chains, stronger than fear. The traders snarled, stepping closer. "So be it. If you won't return her, then we'll take her by force." Daniel didn't move. His hands curled into fists, but his face stayed calm, like a man who had already made peace with whatever would come. The girl's legs shook. She wanted to scream, to run, but something inside her shifted. No one had ever stood between her and danger. No one had ever said she was worth protecting. She couldn't let him face this alone. "Stop," she cried, her voice breaking. The traders paused, surprised to hear her speak. Her kind rarely spoke in public, beaten into silence. But now her voice trembled with strength. "I am not property." "I will not go with you," the traders laughed. "You think your words matter? You were trained to obey. You are nothing." Daniel stepped forward, blocking their path, his shadow falling long in the fading light. His voice was low, almost a growl. "Then you'll have to go through me." The air grew tense. The traders exchanged looks, their anger sharp. But something in Daniel's stance made them hesitate. He wasn't armed, yet he stood like a man who had faced worse than them. Finally, one spat on the ground. "This isn't over, human. You'll regret this defiance." They turned and walked away, their threats heavy in the air. When silence returned, the girl collapsed onto the steps, tears running down her cheeks. She couldn't stop shaking. Daniel knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "They'll be back," she whispered. "They won't stop." Daniel nodded. "I know. Then why do you risk everything? Why not give me to them? Why fight a battle you cannot win?" Daniel's eyes met hers, firm but gentle. "Because the moment I hand you over, I lose more than my life. I lose my soul." Her breath caught again. The words were strange, but they felt true. This wasn't about pride or rebellion. It was about something deeper, something she had never been given before. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made her flinch. She imagined the traders breaking through the door, dragging her away, leaving Daniel broken. Fear pressed against her chest until she couldn't breathe. Finally, she rose and walked to his door. For the first time, she knocked softly. Daniel opened it, his eyes calm even in the dark. She hesitated, trembling, then whispered, "I'm scared." He didn't touch her, didn't pull her close. He simply stepped aside and said, "Then stay here tonight." She entered, curling on the floor near his bed, hugging a blanket. He didn't move toward her, didn't demand anything. He just let her be. The quiet of his presence was stronger than chains, stronger than fear. As sleep finally took her, one thought burned inside. Maybe I'm not an animal. Maybe I'm something more. The next morning, the sun rose bright, but the shadow of danger still lingered. The traders had not gone away, and both Daniel and the girl knew the real fight was still to come. The morning was too quiet. The sky above the settlement was pale, but the air carried a heavy tension like the calm before a storm. Daniel knew the traders would return. He could see it in the way neighbors shut their doors when he passed, in the way whispers grew sharper each day. Everyone was waiting for the clash. The girl felt it too. She sat near the window, staring at the fields beyond. Every sound made her flinch. The crunch of boots, the rustle of leaves. Fear coiled inside her like a serpent, but beneath it was something new. She wasn't just afraid for herself anymore. She was afraid for Daniel. And then they came. 5 traders this time, not 3. Bigger, stronger, armed with whips and blades. They moved across the field with purpose, their eyes burning with rage. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, too scared to intervene. The entire settlement seemed to hold its breath. Daniel stepped outside before they could reach the door. He stood tall, calm as ever, his gray-streaked hair catching the wind. The leader of the traders spat on the ground. "Enough of this game, human. Hand her over now, or we'll burn this house to ash with you inside it." The girl's chest tightened. Her body wanted to run, to hide, but her feet rooted to the floor. Daniel's voice cut through the tension, low and steady. "She is not yours. She never was." The crowd that had gathered gasped. No one had ever spoken against the market like this. It was law, it was tradition, and here was one man tearing it apart with a single sentence. The traders laughed, cruel and sharp. "You think one human can fight us all? Do you think your weak hands will stop us?" Daniel clenched his fists but did not move. His calm gaze never wavered. "If I fall today, I fall protecting her. That's worth more than living in your chains." The girl's heart pounded. Tears burned in her eyes. No one had ever spoken for her like this. No one had ever said her life mattered. The leader snarled and stepped forward, raising his blade. The crowd tensed. The moment had come, and then the girl moved. She stumbled out the door, her small frame pushing past Daniel. He tried to stop her, but she shook her head, her violet eyes shining with a courage she didn't know she had. "No," her voice rang out across the field. The traders froze. The crowd went silent. Even Daniel's breath caught. Her voice trembled but grew stronger with every word. "I am not property. I am not an animal. I choose to stay with him." The leader barked a laugh. "Your choice means nothing." But she stepped closer, standing tall despite the fear in her body. "It means everything. You call me trained to obey, but I refuse. You call me property, but I say I am free. And before all these witnesses, I say this: Daniel is my husband. By my will, not his." The settlement erupted in murmurs. Shock spread like fire. No one had ever heard one of the so-called pleasure animals speak with such defiance. No one had seen one stand beside a human as equal, as wife. Daniel's chest tightened with pride. He had fought for her, but now she was fighting for herself. The traders faltered, their confidence cracking. If they dragged her away now, it would not look like business, it would look like tyranny. Too many eyes were watching. The whispers of rebellion already stirred among the crowd. The leader growled, but his hand dropped from his blade. "This isn't finished," he spat. "You've cursed yourself, human. Both of you will regret this." They turned and stormed away, their threats hanging in the air. But the crowd did not jeer or mock this time. They only watched, silent, shaken by what they had witnessed. When the traders were gone, the girl collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel knelt beside her, steadying her with gentle hands. "You were brave," he said quietly. She shook her head, sobbing. "I was so afraid." "And yet," he replied, "you stood." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time she didn't see only her savior. She saw her partner, someone who would walk with her, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her. Her voice was soft but certain. "I am free now." "Truly free?" Daniel nodded, his hand resting gently over hers. "Yes, and no one will ever take that from you again." That night the settlement was still buzzing with whispers, but the tone had changed. Some called Daniel reckless, others called him foolish. But many, quietly, secretly, felt inspired. If one human and one broken girl could stand against the market, maybe others could too. Inside the small home, the girl lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, her chest did not ache with fear. She wasn't waiting for footsteps in the dark. She wasn't waiting for chains. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I chose this life. I chose him." And with that, she drifted into sleep. Not as a slave, not as an animal, but as a free soul, and as a wife by her own will.